Welcome back to another Conscious Energy Officer show. I'm your host, Grant Parr, and I'm here with my two collaborators.
That's right. Graham Betchard here, and we got John Costanzo with us. Welcome, everybody, to the Conscious Energy Officer show, where our intention is to take the mental skills that Grant Parr and I learned through sports and CEOs and companies, and to pair those with awesome John here, who is a veteran on the force and has been doing mental skills training for years. And our goal is to provide this show for you officers out there and give you some pathways to follow to really be at your best. And we're grateful to do this work. And want to shout out our sponsor real quick, Train the Mind and Max Conscious, two incredible companies that have dedicated their lives to serving, to helping, to giving people a pathway to be at their best with mental skills training. And grateful. John, grateful you're here, man. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, another good week.
Come on, man. Well, as we're still going, the way we do the show is we're going to bring up a pressure point from the day in the life of a police officer. And we're going to go through and talk about that pressure point and work through some of the mental training. So, John, why don't you get us kicked off today and let us know where we're starting with some pressure.
All right. So this week, I want to talk about feelings, but specifically fear. Fear, we can start with fear as in officers when they get to a scene and they feel that sense of fear. And then, we can just go on from there. So we'll start with fear.
Well, let's start with this. Like, John, you're living this every day. What are some of the fears that come up for you when you're approaching the scene, when you get onto the scene, and is there any fear when you leave the scene?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Going to the scene, I think is, you want to control it before you even get there. And like using the skills, that's a very dangerous place to be because there's a lot happening as you're just going to the scene, right? Really, in a sense, we're forcing our way to the scene, which is kind of wild to think, right? Because you're going lights and sirens. You're going against the red light, green light, the flow of traffic. You're going against it, right? Because you have to get there, especially for a priority call. And a priority call is someone with a gun. There's a fight, an active fight. Somebody just got robbed. Homicide. All those things we need to get there quickly. Somebody's unconscious, right? That alone, right? What do? We got to perform CPR. We got to go get an AED. We have to try to save their life.
Wow.
And time is precious because after 10 minutes, they say you're brain dead, right? So speed is of essence. So you have to find that fine line, going into it. So to go back to your question, fear, I mean, it comes out of nowhere, right? I mean, I don't know too much about tunnel vision and adrenaline, but maybe you guys could speak more about that. Does that have a direct link to fear or the unknown, maybe?
Man, first of all, powerful, right? So I'm imagining you, maybe you're sitting in your car or whatever you're doing, right? And then this call comes in, right? It's like just booms out over the radio. Some situation is going on, like you talked about, that's very heightened, where there's real danger, right? There's like some real danger going on. It's either someone's hurt, someone's about to get hurt, there's a fight, and then walk us through that real quick. Like when you first start to recognize the feelings, what's it like? Because we've noticed this too, when people get hit with those emotions, there is a tendency to speed up, right? Or if we think about like pressure packed situations, if it's in sports or something, clearly no one's lives are on the line, right? Totally different. But what we can relate to is there's this tendency to want to speed up, right? To like hurry up and get to this outcome, because when those emotions hit, and maybe there's some fear, it's uncomfortable, you want to kind of, your instincts are to get out of that shit. Like, get me the fuck out of this fear. How do I get the hell out of this fear? And of course, the last thing you ever want to do under pressure is be in a hurry, right? That is the absolute, right. That's where all the mistakes happen, all the problems happen. But so now we're sitting here going, I have this juice in my body that makes me want to go like hyper speed. I'm going to fucking cause serious problems, right? Look at my hands right away. I'm like, ah! So you can see, like, walk us through that a little bit, John, when that hits, because in the human experience, right, you're a human being choosing to be a police officer. You're going to get hit with feelings.
Yeah.
No matter who you are, when those hit you and you're in that car, what's the next minute like? What's the next like 60 seconds like for you? How do you work through that a little bit when you feel everything wanting to go super fast?
So what I've noticed is time doesn't really process when you're in those feelings. It seems like a really long time, but when you look back, it was very short. Like when you're in a fight with somebody, there's a lot of feelings there, right? You're like, whoa, I need to survive, right? This person's trying to do harm to me. And so when you look back, it feels like a 20-minute fight, but in reality, it was maybe 2, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a minute, right? So I noticed that. So it kind of extends in your memory, but when you feel it, whew, I mean, it just comes out of nowhere because sometimes you have seconds to decide life and death situations. And that is a very, like, talk about pressure. I mean, that's real. You know, I mean, it's because that's the difference between you going to jail, somebody getting hurt or killed. You know, I mean, there's so much pressure going on there. So, and fear just sneaks right in. You know, it just hits you. They say shit hits the fan. I mean, that's a good example of, you know, something just coming at you because you don't see it. You know, somebody could have a knife on them. You know, I don't know when I go speak to somebody or someone's at a heightened state, I don't know if they have a weapon on them. You know, I don't know. And it's very easy to conceal, especially in the wintertime. You got a big coat, you don't see the bulge in their waistband, or they could have a knife in their pocket. I mean, they hide stuff everywhere. So that's the real fear is, are they going to harm me? You know, especially when they're at a heightened state, right? So naturally, you want to go into control. But as we know, that's not you know, you want to be safe, but if you can avoid going into that need for control and just try to connect with them, coming in palms down, like we discussed last week, what I've noticed is that's a very powerful place to be because you're like Grant said last week, you're the composer of the energy.
Yeah.
You say, oh, okay, I'll lead this. We're up here. Let's bring it down here. You know, let's lower it down a little bit. Tell me what's going on. We have a need for, we must control them in this space. But in reality, if they're moving around a little bit, hey, that's okay. It's still under control, right?
You know, it's like really amazing to think about, like, it from when this thing hits you, it makes you want to speed up. And there's real danger. So we acknowledge that, right? Absolutely, it's real. And then at the same time, if we're operating from a place of fear, we may not, and we're in a hurry, we're not going to be at our best in that moment, right? So it's almost like we know these situations are going to come up, right? In police officer work, it's going to come up. We almost look at it like we have to proactively be ready for this. And so when these things happen, like you said, John, it happens in a second, we're able to find our breath for just a moment, right? Or we're able to, before we even put our uniform on, work through, maybe do some visualizing of like, okay, here's how I'll respond when this stuff comes up, because it's going to come up. And learning how to slow those moments down.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, when we work with athletes in big, like the Super Bowl or the Olympics or any sporting event, nobody has to get up. Everyone's learning to calm down. That's like the master skill is like, I have to calm this down to get it to a level because it's so heightened. And it's like in your work, it's like, if we can bring it down, then we can be in those moments that, yes, there's some real shit on the line, but now I'm seeing with clarity. Now I'm seeing what's here instead of like I'm just seeing fear everywhere. I'm actually seeing what's happening. So if I'm seeing someone reaching for a knife, I can slow that down a little bit and know what to do in that moment, right? And know how to be and process. When I work with UFC fighters, they don't fight well angry or fearful, right? They fight well when they're just right in that centered place. They're relaxed, as funny as it sounds. Hands are relaxed. Boom, the hand only gets tightened when it connects with someone. They don't fight well like this. Like, let's fight. Like that's not going to work, right? You're going to burn all your energy. So when it heightens, have you found like any of the skills that we're working on? What helps you kind of lower that for yourself, just to be really real? Like, how do you do that, man?
So for me, I do a lot of self-talk. And when the feelings come, because like we talked about last week, those are real. We need to acknowledge them. We cannot mute them or run from them. I try to come in and say, are you in danger? That's a very good question, because feelings aren't facts, right?
Yeah.
So are you in danger? And then I say, oh, no, I'm not. Okay. So now we can solve this. We solve this, palms down, and I lower my energy. I get it. Everything's trying to drive me up. The nature of the call, the dispatcher's voice on the radio. Maybe there's another officer there already fighting and he's excited because he's in it, right? So I need to take all that's out of my control and say, okay, what's in my control? What's important now? What's in John's control? And I start there. And then I say, okay, am I in danger? No, I'm not. Okay. And that just kind of, I was here and now I'm coming down.
Yeah.
Right. Because we can't, as much as we'd love to save everybody in the world, we can't. So we need to let that go.
Yeah.
We need to accept that. We'll just do our best. And that's all we can do. And that moment, being in the present moment, is the strongest place. What I've noticed with those feelings, leaning into that discomfort. So that's where, I think that's where it starts. At least for me, the foundation was being present in that moment, feeling those feelings and leaning into it, and really palms down that moment, right? I'm not in danger. Let's be the alpha leader here, and let's be under control, that inner control. So yeah.
John, how does an officer train for this? Because when Graham and I are working with athletes, we don't want to teach them these skills that we're talking about right now and go, hey, do this during your game, do this during your performance. We don't want that. We want them to rep it out during practice by themselves. So when they are actually playing, when they're performing, it feels comfortable. They've worn it a little bit. They know how to move with this stuff, because the last thing you want to do is try something on while you're performing. You've never done it before, and now you're distracted, right?
Right.
So with the officer, how do you practice this stuff? Or is this like there isn't a lot of practice? You get your training and then you're out on the streets and you just have to like try this on, and it's just on the job training. How do you train for this?
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of on the job training. They teach you a certain way, but on the street, it doesn't go that way. When, talk to this person this way, it doesn't work like that. It's very robotic. Just because they're just trying to get, there's so much to the job, there's a lot of unknown in this job. There's a lot of situations. No situations are the same. Because you're dealing with people's, personalities and how they perceive things. And it's just, there's so much to the job that really connecting with a person is huge, but you have to kind of learn their characteristics on the fly and watch when you may have triggered them. Okay, I need to bring it down a little bit from that, because clearly that raised some excitement in them,
Right.
Like, man, what are they going through? So yeah.
That connection, John, that's a really big one. And you mentioned this earlier. You broke it down really well. You focus on what you can control. You're in the present moment, and then you're feeling your feelings, right? So you're not denying they're there, but within that, you're choosing your response to the feelings. That is such a big thing, because when we start working with people, they'll say, okay, I want to feel confident. And we're like, no problem. Did you know confidence doesn't mean you feel good all the time? It means you know how to be vulnerable. it means you know how to be uncomfortable. That's actually what confidence is. Not that everything is great all the time and I feel amazing. Like that's fragile, actually, if that's the only time you can perform well, right? So
Right.
I mean that you're like, hey, I feel vulnerable. I feel, some fear. It's here, but I'm gonna palms down, right? This is choosing our response. I'm gonna choose my response in this moment. So there we are, but the surfboard's behind me, right? There you're riding the waves. You're like, wow, no, I'm feeling these emotions, but still watching the language I use, watching my body language, right? Watching, because we're always communicating all the time. And if you're trying to de-escalate someone, well, we have to de-escalate ourselves first, right? I remember it's a totally different situation, but I used to work in the fitness industry. I was, managing a gym. And my first day managing a gym, I remember being on the, in my office, someone comes up and says, hey, there's a fight upstairs. And I was like, oh, shit, And as soon as they said there was a fight, right? Whoop, my elevation right through the roof. I'm like, I barely know where the bathrooms are. It's my first day here. And I have to go I don't know, deal with some fight. And so I felt everything escalate. And I immediately took a breath and started walking towards the floor where it was. And I started talking myself down as I was walking there because everything was heightened. And I was like, okay, find your breath, focus on what you can control. And I get up and I look down the weight room, and this big guy has a 45-pound dumbbell above his head. And it looks like he wants to smash, like somebody else. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I feel it heighten even more. So I say, in my mind, I'm like, stay calm, like what I can do. And I just start going over. And then I started to recognize the guy with the weight, who was holding the weight. He was kind of in another world, meaning he was kind of laughing. And everyone else was really scared, but I could tell, oh, this guy's having like a situation, maybe a mental health breakdown or something like that. And so I just got really calm. I felt frightened. I felt scared, but I tried as best I could to be palms down. And I was like, hey, and I just tried to connect with him. And I was like, hey, you can't bring weights over your head. Why don't we put the weights down? Literally talking like that, like, hey, like gentle. I mean, my heart was fucking probably 200 beats a minute. It was fucking insane, right? But I'm like, so I'm feeling all the human experience, but I tried to be as calm as possible. And the guy said, oh, okay. And he put the weight down. I said, hey, why don't we just go for a walk? Like, let's just go outside. And he's big. He looked like 6'4", like he was lifting weights. And he was like, okay. And so he just kind of walked with me, and my heart is pounding. And I'm walking with this guy. We have to go down this tight corridor. I'm like, shit. We go down these stairs, like, and I just said, just be calm, be centered. And I just kept leading in that space. Walked him out the front door and was like, hey, man, maybe we'll try it again another day. Today wasn't a good day, working out. He was like, hey, no problem. And he left. And after I was like, oh, I went after John. The reason I'm sharing this is because it worked, right? I was like, wow. And it's way different than your work, but that was a little situation that I could kind of try to connect to on that. But what happened after was, man, I was super elevated. I'm trying to go back to work in the gym, like managing trainers. And I'm like, I just fucking was in like a crazy ass situation where people were freaked out. And it's like, 9 a.m. And I'm like, what? I'm trying to do like paperwork and everything's elevated. So I wasn't quite sure how to come down after that, how to come back. I'm assuming that you guys have that experience all the time. And like, what is it like after, trying to come down? And then after, like, you're trying to function after. What if you get another call and you're still in kind of this heightened space and you're trying to come to another call, and it's like all of a sudden emotions are stacking on top of each other. Like, I definitely felt short after that experience. Like, that took a lot of what I had to be mindful and to be present and to be palms down. And my tanks felt kind of low after that, man. And I can't imagine what you go through after. And I think it's important for us to work on, like, how do we come down after this? How do we recover?
Yeah.
And how do we process?
That's a good question. Afterwards, yeah, I mean, you feel those feelings. What I've noticed is sometimes you do have to go to another call right away.
Wow.
And sometimes I have to come back to that. Sometimes I have to say, pause, right? I know you're there, but I need to respond to something else right now. So it's not that I, mute it. I definitely go back to it later. That's why, for me, going to the gym, 5 days a week is super important. Just taking a couple minutes in a day just to find a quiet place and just breathe. you know, just be there with those feelings, you know. Um, and then when they, when they come back through, we try to understand them, you know. I try to understand why I felt the way I did and for what purpose. But, in the end of the day, it's about having that, that grace and compassion for yourself. I mean,
Right.
that's it. Like you're a human being just like anybody else. Yes, you wear a badge, but we all make mistakes. If you make a mistake, you gotta. Hey, I'm a human being. What did I learn from it? What did I take from it? And if it's not a mistake, and it's just a feeling of that discomfort, like you may have felt afterwards. I mean, that's real, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
stuff really happens. I mean, like I said, most people are running from that. We're running to it. So that is really just leaning into that. It's a vulnerable place to be. Sometimes sharing a story, even
Yeah.
if the person I share it with doesn't understand what it is like to be a cop, I still share it because sometimes for me, it's just getting it off my chest.
Oh,
Yeah.
A lot of
You
times
know
I
it.
have to internalize things, and I
mm,
think that's why the suicide rate is the number one killer of cops.
mm.
And
Ah,
that's we cannot internalize this stuff. This is high level stuff. You have to share your story. You have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to have that courage to be vulnerable and to share that moment with somebody, even if it may be emotional, just to get it off your chest. I mean, I go to counseling. I'll be real.
Oh yeah.
heck
I
yeah.
have a counselor.
Heck yeah.
We all should have a counselor,
Oh
right?
yeah. Totally. Totally. I think it's especially with your profession, but just in life, I think that's to be a human, our recovery
Mm.
is sharing our story. I mean, whether if you're a performer, a police officer, you need to talk. You need to learn how to crack open your chest because some way, somehow, if you don't take care of your system inside, it'll pop out, and it'll probably come out when you don't want it to come out, or it comes out on somebody else.
Right.
Um, so it's that is huge. Is just and we live in a day and age now where it's okay. It's okay to like share your story. It
Yeah.
Absolutely.
is. It's actually okay, right? Um, I do want to bring up too that not to switch gears here, but because when you're talking about going from one scene to the next, you go to a heightened scene, and then you have to go to another one.
Yeah.
So that is to me, it sounds like a great like it's our third principle from the MC4 is next play speed. How do you
Mm,
go from one play to the next? I know there's several plays within a scene, right? There's different dynamics and moving parts, but like when you as an officer that has to perform and to go from one scene to the next,
Mm.
yep.
you have to kind of recalibrate yourself to get ready for the next play.
Exactly. Yeah. And I call that tapping in.
Mm,
Next play speed, tapping in. The reason I say tapping in is because when you realize you have that awareness that you're outside, let's use a wrestling, right? You're that guy on the outside, but the battle is on the inside, right? So you need to tap yourself back in, you
Mm.
know, into that moment. And you're right, that's a very good point. And that is one skill that I definitely use going to the next scene is being present. A lot of people say to cops, stay safe. But I thought about that, and safety is not really in our control. I can't stay safe because I don't know what's going to come at me at any time. None of us do. A human being walking across the street, you could get crushed by a car.
Yeah.
You could get shot. I mean, that's real, right?
Yeah.
So when you say stay safe, that's almost in a sense of fear. When if you say, I say stay present,
Mm.
yeah.
and when
I,
you're present, what I've noticed is you see dangers coming because you're fully present as much as you can be, right?
right. Right. Yeah.
So
Wow.
that, you know, yeah, that's a so I'm constantly tapping back into the moment, and coming back because hey, I feel those feelings and my brain wants to stay there in that last call, but I need to be here in this call. And this is a totally different case. This is a totally different person I'm dealing with. I cannot bring these feelings into this next call. Because if I do,
Yeah.
we're messing with danger, and we can't. We need to, allow. Hey, I'm gonna pause that feeling. I'm gonna come back to it later. And I'm gonna sit with it for a moment. Whether it's after work, I need a minute after work just to clear my thoughts. Whatever it is. Maybe on my lunch break. Maybe just I'm gonna go to a spot for a minute and just close my eyes and just breathe for a second.
Man, that's so wild that instead of be safe, be present. I couldn't agree more with that. It's like when someone says, "Oh, I want to win this game." It's like, stop fucking thinking about winning. If you want to win, be present. Like truly, if you truly care about some sort of outcome, then your ass needs to be present all in right now. Period. Like we've got that down to the essence. We know that. It's not even arguable. Like if you're concerned about some sort of outcome, have your ass be fully present, fully trusting, because you'll see better, right? We say see and breathe. See what's really happening and breathe in the now and be in this space, right? And, be where your feet are, right? My feet are here. I got to be here as well. That is like, if you're not playing present, you're playing yourself, like you're in danger. You truly are. Like if you're not present, to me, you're not safe. That goes for driving a fucking car. If you're not present, that's how accidents happen.
Yep.
Like, and in that sense, you're like, was it an accident? You're like, no, I was focused on some other shit. Well, guess what happened? You know what I mean? Like your car hit something. I was sending a text message. Like, well, that's really it. So right. I think you couldn't have hit it on the head more, man. I mean, right. Being really where it's at.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, I focus on staying present and just being curious of the unknown. Actually, I love not knowing what's going to happen every day because every day is different. I'm not just going to a desk and typing up the same report every day, or it's cool because the connections and the things that happen when I'm present are they're amazing.
Right. Totally. It's interesting too when we think about resiliency, right? When we think about that word of being like to withstand something, and it is like, but it's also how do you like the unknown? Like you have to be resilient. You have to train yourself to be resilient, to move with the unknown because you have no clue what the fuck is going to come at you, like from scene to scene. So resiliency is also, or to be resilient, is what you're doing to prepare for the unknown. Right. So when you're going to a scene, are you breathing and talking? Are you working your routine? Do you have time to do that stuff? Or are you hoping that shit just works out? And I would assume in the line of being a police officer, you don't want to hope. Hope to me, like, I hope I do well today. I hope this goes well. Like, it's just so uncertain when I use that. I love hope. I think hope is a beautiful emotion when you're down on your luck. You don't have a place to live. You don't have food. You don't have transportation. Hope. I want you to hope. But when you're actually performing this type of duty, I want you to know.
Yeah.
That's man, wow. Couldn't say it better, Grant. Man, that's I think that's why, just kind of bringing it back, we built a training system so it's not just out there hoping. You're not just throwing it out there. You're like, no, there's real practical steps, things you can train on. And John, I know you've been doing mental training for well over a decade. Like you're well versed in this. But for me, like when I found a pathway, we go, okay, this isn't about hope. It's about applying these skills all the time. I got to apply this shit. And if I apply this shit, good stuff's going to happen, right? And I can't control the outcomes, but if I'm trusting my process and I'm putting energy and effort, intention, right, and I'm doing all of that with this, now I'm not hoping, I'm doing it. Like I'm not just sitting there going, God, I hope something saves me. Like, no, nothing's going to save me. I'm doing this work.
Yeah.
And now we can go from hope to, really something very practical. And that's why we call this a skill set, right? This isn't like you have to be born with this. No, right. But you do have to practice. But practice, you get better at it.
I mean, look at the Navy SEALs, for example. They don't just show up and then, let's use our skills now. No, they are the hardest trainers, and that's why they are the most elite. And officers should be in that same boat because every day life is on the line. Every single day, you show up and you have the uniform on, it's on.
That's right. That's right. And that's why it's as we start to wrap, man, 30 minutes goes by fast, man. I love this show with y'all. That's why we built this system. That's why we built the Conscious Energy Officer program. That's why we built Max Consciousness. So you're not out there just hoping, like going, well, we'll see. You know what I mean? No, let's practice this. Different space. But, you know, I got to spend some time with Michael Jordan, you know, the great basketball player. I know his mental coach, great. And Michael Jordan told me this shit saved his life. I mean, think about that, right? It was like he trained in this to learn how to perform under pressure, to learn how to do that. So we want everyone to have access to it. I mean, and John, you're a living example of it, of doing it, man. That's why this stuff is so inspiring, you know, to put it together. So we want to encourage everyone to come check it out. We're going to be kicking off our first class for officers in January 2023. But we want everyone to know there's a place. This isn't hope, but you do have to train. This isn't just like, oh, it's luck. This isn't luck or hope. This is real shit, right? If you really apply it, it's true. The first time someone goes from this to this, it blows their mind.
Yeah.
Like, this shit works. We'll be like, we know it works. So keep practicing. Keep practicing. And that's where the athletic mindset comes in, because what we learn from athletes is they'll fucking do it every day. Athletes, they'll do it for 5-6 hours. They'll train every day, right? For like 3 minutes of performance. Right. So we can apply ourselves and practice this and train. And I want to encourage everyone. We don't just train this while we're doing police officer work or while like we do this all the time.
All the time.
Practice being present right now. You know what I mean? Right now, we got all of us are in it. Me and Grant, we've been coaching for years. We got to practice this shit every day. You know, and if I don't practice for a few days, it starts to go downhill.
Yep.
Like, yeah, don't drink water for a day. See what happens. Like shit goes down. Hold your breath right now. Shit's going to go downhill in like 40 seconds. You know what I mean?
Right.
So this is stuff we got to practice all the time. So,
you know, the cool thing really quick, the cool thing about that is it's progress over perfection.
That's right.
So even though we practice it every day, it just gets better and better. What I've realized, there is no plateau to this work. You know, there's no perfection, but there's no plateau. It constantly just gets better and better and better, which is what drives that excitement. Versus if you were lifting weights, right? You have plateaus, right? With this work, you show up every day. You do it every day. You practice it every day. It just gets better and better and better.
Well, right on that note, it's a wrap for our show. We'll see everyone next week for another edition of the Conscious Energy Officer Show. Grant, John, amazing. Grateful.
See you next week.